Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The topic is how to be a good Muslim mom. We are bombarded with messages, that the Muslim woman's purpose is to be a wife and a mom, and, we need to be feminine, we need to devote our lives to our families and these kind of things. But nobody actually talks about what does that mean, how to be a good Muslim mom. And I know the title is a little bit clickbaity, what's the definition of a good Muslim mom, right? But I wanted you here because I want to present, my experiences and the things I've learned along the way. My name is Salma and I'm a Muslim mom. I've been a mom for 22 years. I have 6 children ranging from 7.5 up to 22 years of age. And I'm a trained midwife and a Simplicity parenting coach. Welcome. I've been dealing with Muslim moms in one way or the other for the last 25 years. And often moms will come to me and be asking for very specific advice. How to deal with their husbands, how to deal with their children, how to deal with their in-laws, very specific things. My child's not listening to me. I'm yelling. Just chaos in the house. I'm fighting with my husband. My mother-in-law is overbearing, all kinds of situations, right? And what I learned while working with moms and, educating myself and through my own experience is that it all kind of boils down to 3 factors, right? And so this is what I want to discuss today. 3 tips on how to be a good Muslim mom. Okay. And so I want you to basically think of your life and your strengths, right? And the things that you can work on. I want you to think of your core competencies, right? And core competencies are usually mentioned in like a business setting, like, what core competencies of a particular business are. But I want you to use that idea towards your own life, right? And think of your core competencies as a Muslim mom. What are the things that no one else can do that are your core competencies that, you're the only person that can get it done. And those are sort of the 3 tips on how to actually be a good Muslim mom, how to focus on the things that are important, and how to sort of set that foundation to be able to deal with the daily struggles of being a Muslim mom. Okay. And so when I say Muslim mom here, I'm keeping it deliberately vague. That can mean so many different things, right? We probably don't come from the same cultures, right? Because Muslim Ummah is, mashallah, very diverse. We all have different backgrounds, different experiences, different amount of children. Our marriages are set up differently. We come from different cultural expectations. So I'm keeping it vague. We're talking here about, a Muslim mom, okay? Something that keeps us, we live our life for the sake of Allah. So we're not going to go into the details of that, what that might mean particularly for you. But because I've lived in different places, I've lived in North America, I lived in Europe, and now I'm living in the Middle East. My experience has shown me that Muslim moms go pretty much through the same things, right? So let's get started. So if you think about the 3 core competencies of a Muslim mom, or the things she should focus on, number 1 is self-care. Now, that is just such a cliched term, right? Bubble bath comes to mind, or, Pinterest pages or whatever, right? What do I mean by self-care? I mean this idea that you are worthy of being taken care of, and that you are the only one that can do it, that you need to take responsibility to take care of yourself. What does that mean? That means in multiple different angles, right? And so number 1, spiritually, you're the only one to perform your prayers. You're the only one that can make dua for yourself, right? Those are the things we cannot outsource. Like, I cannot get somebody else to pray Fajr for me, right? I can get help in many other different ways, but when it boils down to it, I'm the one that has to pray. I'm the one that has to recite the Qur'aan for myself, right? So spiritual self-care, physical self-care. No one else can sleep for me. That's not something I can outsource, right? So if I'm tired, my husband taking a nap is not going to help, right? Or my kids taking a nap. It has to be me. So that's sort of basic care of ourselves, right? So it's spiritual, it's physical, making sure we get enough sleep, making sure we get enough water, making sure we move our bodies, making sure we see some sunshine, okay? We get some fresh air. So these are kind of the basic kind of prerequisites of self-care, physical self-care. Then there is the mental self-care. considering our mental state. Are we depressed? Are we anxious? What is going on here? Are we tired? Are we overwhelmed? These kind of things. And nobody else can deal with that unless we deal with it ourselves, right? And we might have different triggers based on our growing up, based on our experience, and we might get stuck in each of these areas, right? We might have a hard time with our prayer. We might have a hard time with the Qur'an reading. We might have a hard time with sleep, right? If we're pregnant, breastfeeding, we have little babies who are waking up constantly, right? We might have a hard time with being depressed or anxious or having a more serious condition, right? Any of these things requires time and care, right? And the responsibility here is on us. We got to take care of these things in order to be a good mom. Okay, so a lot of times when women present me, with their problems and situation, it very rarely has to do anything with their children. It actually has to do with lack of their own self-care. If mom hasn't slept, if mom's tired, if mom's depressed, if mom's stressed out, kids are going to feel it, right? And many of us come from households, where the parents were not able to regulate themselves emotionally, physically, and these kind of things. Everybody, when you look at the Muslim TikTok or Muslim Instagram, everybody's sort of pointing that picture of the mom who's, beating the child with the slipper and these kind of things. We got to do better than that, right? And so first thing is to take care of ourselves, physically, spiritually, mentally, right? That's the self-care we really mean here. And so that's going to look like differently based on where you're at in life. If you have little children, if you have a lot of children, if you're just starting out as a mom. But that sort of self-care is your core competency. Nobody can do that for you. Now, often we kind of fall into the victim trap. We're expecting other people to read our minds, right? We're expecting our spouses to fill that gap. We're waiting for the husbands to make us happy, right? We're waiting even for the children to give us validation, to make us happy, how many moms have said, oh, you make mommy sad. No, this is the wrong thing to say, because we should be in charge of our own feelings, right? It's not the kid's job to make us happy, right? And a lot of times it's an unfillable void for the children, right? And so that puts us in a very wrong dynamic with the kids, right? And so we should not be victims in these kind of things. And again, we come all from vastly different backgrounds and circumstances. So some of us might have gone through abusive situations. Some of us have gone through poverty or war or genocide or these kind of things. But it's on us now to figure out how to get up there, like to take responsibility and say, okay, I'm not a victim here. I'm going to figure this out one step at a time. Now, there's a lot of things here, right? Maybe if you figured out, your physical situation needs some care, you need more movement, you need more water, you need healthier foods. That's something to work on. But at the same time, if it's something spiritual, if your iman is particularly low, if you're not feeling that great, a lot of times moms will come to me and they will say that they feel like their iman is particularly low, that they feel very disconnected. But then turns out it's an actual physical condition. It's a lack of vitamin D. They're anemic. They can't get out of bed. So it's not actually the iman that it's low, but rather the physical state is in quite a bad shape, right? When was the last time you were outside? When was the last time you were in nature? When was the last time you breathed some fresh air? These kind of things. So self-care is number one ingredient. And again, I say it in a very wide kind of net of self-care. All these things, we could make a specific video for each of these topics, right? And I've done this working with moms, I run parenting groups and we have discussed each of these things, separately. But just to kind of give you an idea, the main idea here, number one thing, your first core competency is self-care, taking care of yourself. And it's not easy. A lot of times, maybe we were told that we're not worthy of taking time for ourselves. Maybe it seems selfish initially. We are taught to be selfless, to just give to others. Now, I'm not saying not to give to others, but I'm saying is we have to fill our cup first before we give it to anyone else, right? And so we have to make sure we operate, from a point of physical and mental and spiritual stability before we are able to pass that on to the new generation, right? So self-care is number one. The second core competency, which you need, in order to be a good mom. And again, I'm going to speak here in very general terms. I know there might be single moms out there. I know there might be widowed moms out there, but we're talking here in general terms, and that is your marriage, right? The second core competency for you as a Muslim mom should be to prioritize your marriage, because Generally speaking, again, I'm not going into details. A healthy marriage is going to result in a healthier mom. It's going to result in a mom who has a partner. It's going to result in the involvement of the father in raising the children. So all that, a supportive spouse is going to help her be a better mom, right? And so often when, moms come to me and ask me specific questions, when we start to dig deeper, turns out there is dysfunction in the marriage itself, right? And so it's very hard to parent a kid one way if the husband is on the other page. It's very difficult for a mom who's caught up in fighting and who's caught up in holding a grudge, and there's miscommunication and there's mistreatment. She can't show up as the best version of herself to be a mom to these kids, right? She's absolutely overwhelmed trying to hold her head barely above the water in terms of her marriage and the dynamic of surrounding her marriage, that she doesn't have enough energy to show up for her kids, right? So second core competency, and that's the kind of core competency that you are the only one responsible for. You don't want to be outsourcing your marriage, right? So you want to be making time to get your marriage right. Now, again, there could be glitches in any of these areas as well. There could be issues with communication. There could be issues with your triggers. What are you triggered by? Issues from your upbringing, issues with your spouse's upbringing, all these kind of things. I'm not saying this is easy to work on, but it keeps you kind of focused and organized. So you can take a look, okay, how's my self-care? How's my marriage? These are all components that are going to make you a good Muslim mom, inshallah, right? This is how you're going to bridge that ideal that's being presented and your daily reality, right? By working on any of these categories. So making sure you get enough sleep, making sure you get enough movement, making sure you have a healthy communication with your spouse, making sure you're both on the same page in regards to raising children, in regards to your goals and these kind of things. And that will result in you being a good Muslim mom, okay? So I hope that's clear so far. Then the third core competency is actually mothering your kids, okay? And so I'm being here very specific. I'm here saying here mothering your kids. I'm not going to use parenting, because parenting should be a joint effort with your spouse, right? Children need their fathers. And again, we have a lot of circumstances, where fathers are not available, where we have single families. And I'm not saying it's not possible to raise children in those circumstances. May Allah make it easy for everybody who's struggling with these kind of things. But it's definitely harder. And so we're looking here at an ideal situation where both parents are involved, where both parents are needed. And this is something, Islamically, it is the idea of a healthy family is to have a mother and a father present and involved in their own unique ways, right? Now I'm focusing here on your core competency, which is being a mom. Okay, so I want you to think of the ways, how can you show up for these kids? This is your third competency. These kids are going to only have one mom. Okay, we have a one mom, right? Everybody has just one mom, and it's a lifelong relationship. And many of us still struggle in our relationship with our own mothers, right? It's a complicated relationship, right? We look up to these women. We have a hard time with them. Maybe we don't feel seen. Maybe we don't feel understood. Or maybe we were blessed with an incredibly close relationship, and now we're trying to duplicate that with our kids. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not working, right? And so we want to look at our third competency to focus on how to be a good mom, how to show up to these kids, right? And so what does being a good mom mean? Again, it will depend on your cultural background. Does it mean, and used to mean just, to keep these kids alive, to give birth, to breastfeed them, to feed them, to put food on the table, to meet their basic survival, right? I think the bar has been raised in the last couple of years, right? Basically, if your kids survive past childhood, you were a great mom, right? You kept them alive. You kept them safe from danger. This was the requirement, right? Now, the bar has been raised. We're meant to be their emotional support. We're meant to be their counselors, their guides, almost their best friends, right? So you have to define, what does that mean to you? What is this idea of a good mom? And, do you find yourself in that particular definition? Do you have to define something else for you? Does the good mom cook homemade meals? What if you don't cook homemade meals? What if you choose to spend that time on being with your kids and supporting them emotionally? Your definition will vary. I don't want to kind of put it, I don't want to put my definition out here. So you have to figure out your own definition that works with your cultural background and your life experience, right? It will be unique. We don't have the same background and same position and same kind of things. And so you're going to have to figure out, what does that mean for you being a good mom? That's your core competency. You're the only mom. And there's going to be a lot of triggers. There's going to be a lot of triggers, a lot of unhealed situations from our own childhood. We might get triggered by our own kind of situation. So I'm just realizing my glasses are kind of stained, so we're just gonna, it's really distracting. I keep looking at myself and I see the stains, so I don't want to deal with it right now. Anyway, so I just want to finish off with one last bit what being a good mom means. Being a good mom means parenting or mothering that child that's in front of you. Okay, so taking a good look at that child and figuring out their needs. What does this child want? And Allah blesses us with a variety of different children. Some of them might have higher needs, some of them might have lesser needs, some are easier to deal with, some might be more difficult because of sometimes often when we have children that are very similar to us the way we were growing up. Those are the ones that trigger us the most, right? They remind us of what we needed and didn't get, and now we find it hard to relate to them, right? So being a good mom, a major chunk of being a good mom and showing up for these kids, it's, well, like I said, showing up for them and looking at them the way they are in front of you. Like, so not parenting some imaginary child, the way you think things should be, but rather looking at this child and figuring out what their needs are and showing up in that sense, right? So some kids might need more physical contact, some kids might need more time together, some of them are not behaving so well. And those are then the nitty-gritty kind of things, when parents contact me and say, well, my child's not listening to me, my child is being rude, my child's disrespectful. We need to dig deeper here. What is going on? And more often than not, when we think we're dealing with the issue with the child, when we look at these 3 core competencies, self-care, the relationship in our marriage, and then being a mom, there are steps that are missing in each of these categories that are causing this issue with the child, right? So being a good mom means sort of to set that foundation in all these other areas, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our marriages, being intentional on how we're showing up, looking at this child in front of us, and then trying to match our values that we have as Muslims, match our reality on a daily basis, right? And so we all know it's very noble, to talk about honesty and humility and humbleness and being a good person, all these kind of values. But what does that look like on a Monday morning when the kids wake up screaming, okay? So how do we bridge that? How do we make our values match our reality, right? And my experience being a mom for 22 years, parenting 6 very different children, and still being in the process of parenting. My youngest is only 7.5, so I'm in it for the long run. But even when you have adult children, you still need to figure out how your relationship is going to be defined. These 3 things: your own self-care, your marriage, and then how you show up as a mother, and what are the parts that you need to heal in yourself and you need to figure out in yourself. How can you figure out how to show up for that particular child? Those are the major things that are going to make you a good Muslim mom, inshallah. All right. I hope this helps. And inshallah, if you have any questions, put it in the box down below. If this resonates or if you have any other comments, answer that way. I can tailor my content to what's more appropriate for people watching this channel and, figuring out how to raise these kids, teach them hifz, have this good Muslim family, inshallah, and have these lasting relationships for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I hope this helps, inshallah, and I talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum.